The international break is over, which means FPL is back. And here is my team selection for Game Week 8. So I'm going to start off just by taking a quick look at how my team got on in Game Week 7. I'm not going to spend too long talking about this because I already made a transfer plans video a couple of days ago where I went through this in a bit more detail. Essentially, what I'm looking at the plans I'm looking at essentially revolves around Eze and maybe a couple of other players. Eze with, unfortunately, another blank in Game Week 7. And I just feel like of all the other players in my team, I'm quite happy to own all of them. But Eze and maybe Trent with his fixtures turning a little bit, I could potentially, change some of the funds around with, Alexander-Arnold being the most expensive defender in the game, right? I could repurpose those funds elsewhere. And with Eze not being particularly satisfying to own at the moment. So some transfers involving those couple of players are my first initial instincts. Right, so the defence then. Flecken, Gabriel, Trent and Lewis as things stand if I don't make any transfers. My team, by the way, I've got 4 free transfers available to use, but nothing in the bank. So just bear that in mind. Like I said, Flecken, I'm quite frustrated that he hasn't kept a clean sheet yet. I don't expect him to against Man United, so I'm hoping for maybe some saves points, maybe a lucky penalty save, something like that. That could potentially happen. But ultimately, I don't see a better goalkeeper for the price point that is actually worth using a transfer on. So yeah, I'll stick with Flecken. Gabriel, Bournemouth away, great fixture, just offering loads of threat from set pieces. I really like him as an option. Not necessarily this season because Liverpool are leading the way at the moment, but Arsenal over the last 2 seasons have been statistically the best defence in the league. So even though they've got a fixture like Liverpool coming up in Game Week 9, I wouldn't 100% rule out potential for a clean sheet there. Trent, he's been fantastic this season. 5 clean sheets from 7 games so far. Best defender in the league for expected goal involvements put up. But the fixtures do shift for Liverpool now. They've got Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton, and really other tough fixtures mixed in the next sort of 8 or 9 games, basically. So he could potentially go. But if I got rid of him, I would feel sad not to have him because I still feel like he could, even in the tough fixtures, with just the attacking threat and output that he has, he can still offer up really good points. And I just think with his, attacking threat from defence as well, he's going to be really good for bonus points. So I just think there are so many strings to his bow in terms of scoring points. And then Rico Lewis, who played for England, I think with Kyle Walker being fairly disappointing for Man City of recent, I think he's not nailed on. I don't think you can ever say that about a Man City player, but I think he's as close as it gets. Wolves, Southampton, Bournemouth is his next 3. Obviously got Wolves coming up. Very happy to have him and start him for Game Week 8. So I mentioned potentially getting rid of Trent, and how I would do that, I would downgrade him basically to someone cheaper. The first player I could potentially bring in is Ait-Nouri. 4.4 million, 4 attacking returns from 7 starts so far this season. He does have Man City at home in Game Week 8, so I would transfer out Trent for a player that I probably wouldn't start this week. That might sound completely illogical, but there's one other player I mentioned at the start I wanted to get rid of. So there is logic behind this. But ultimately, I wouldn't be able to play Ait-Nouri against Man City in Game Week 8. I don't think that would be possible. He is basically just playing as a winger for Wolves right now, right? Conceded. Unfortunately, they have conceded the most goals this season of any team in the league. But they have had a really tough start to the season, which will obviously turn post that Man City game. And the Brentford game, right, they conceded 5 goals against Brentford, but he still got 9 points. And I think he's just behind Trent and Leif Davis of Ipswich for expected returns for defenders so far this season. So he's offering a lot of attacking threat and he's nearly saving me 3 million on Trent. So he's obviously an option that I'm looking at. I also, a really, really low owned player here, Milenkovic of Nottingham Forest, just due to his height and size, he's proven to be a real threat from set pieces, and Forest have conceded the 3rd fewest goals in the league so far this season. So they're a pretty frugal defence. And I would say I've done a ranking of defenders, or the best defenders in the game by each price point in a previous video I made during the international break. And in that video, I did a graphic of the best defenders in the league for expected goal involvements. And Milenkovic was 10th, better than any other Nottingham Forest defender, that's for sure. Decent next 3 fixtures: Crystal Palace, Leicester and West Ham coming up. One of the leading defenders in the league for expected goal involvements, particularly at his price point. yeah, he could be a really good option as well. So stick to the end of the video to find out if I bring one of these two in. Oh, the midfield. I'm going to get some flack for this. Salah, Eze, and Mbumo and Rodgers. Now, the transfers that I could potentially make here, there are two, well, actually three routes I could take. The first route is just do nothing. That's one route I could definitely take. The second route is directly replacing Eze. And the third route is making 3 transfers. So I could bring in either one of those defenders that I mentioned for Trent. That would save me, what, 2.3, maybe 2.4 million in the bank. And it would also allow me, if I sold Mo Salah as well, so it would involve selling Mo Salah, I could do Eze and Salah to Cole Palmer and Bukayo Saka. That could potentially be a move I'll make. I'll just go back to Cole Palmer a second, first of all. Obviously put up one of the highest scoring game weeks of all time in game week 6. On penalties, free kicks, plays 90 minutes every game, just ticks all the boxes of a good FPL asset, and he's putting up the same numbers he did last season. So that really impressive year he put up last season, 33 returns and 29 starts, he's matching those numbers per 90 minutes. However, the Chelsea fixtures coming up do get tough, and it was very easy, I think, to be reactive with his performance in Game Week 6. Buy him for Game Week 7 and be quite happy. But I think I'm trying not to let that one magnificent game week in Game Week 6 kind of cloud my judgment. I'm not at all saying that Cole Palmer is a bad asset, but I am thinking about the quality of fixtures he has coming up. Is it really worth bringing him in for the expense of, say, Mo Salah? And Saka, now he's put up really good numbers this season so far as well. Got semi-decent fixtures coming up, although they're not the best. Bournemouth and then Liverpool and then Newcastle. And of course he's got a potential injury from England duty. Lee Carsley said, the England manager said, he would have played him in the second friendly, but he just thought it'd be a little bit unfair to. So the England manager said he was fit and ready to go. However, Arteta in a press conference has said that Saka needs more tests to prove that he's ready to start. I think that's probably just Mikel Arteta playing games in the press, to be honest. I think Saka's going to be ready to go, but can't 100% confirm that, right? Because I'm not inside the Arsenal camp. I don't know exactly what's going on. Another route, I've got one more route I could take. So if you just go back to that midfield to have a look. Again, I've mentioned pretty much all of this in my transfer plans video, but I'm just sort of reinforcing those plans in this video and then ultimately coming to present you my final decision, basically. So I could make those 3 moves, or I could just do Eze to Brennan Johnson. Now, I'm not saying that Brennan Johnson doesn't come without risk himself. He picked up a knock for Wales. I do think he'll be back for Game Week 8, though. And comparatively, per 90, he's put up better numbers and he's got better statistics across the league so far. However, that's in the past like 6 or 7 games, right? But projections going forward, the expected points are fairly similar. If not, Eze slightly edges it. Although, that depends if you want to use expected points as gospel, right? A lot of people have disagreed with this data that I've showed. So this is the decision, basically. This is the decision point. Do I get rid of Eze for Brennan Johnson, make that 3-way swap? Or do I just hold on to him? Because I kind of have an unwritten rule in FPL, right? Where I like to be patient with players I know that are good. And also, players that I just know are going to play. Like, yeah. It's a tough one, isn't it? It's a tough one. I guess the question is the value of keeping a transfer and having 5 next week more valuable than what I would get from doing someone like Eze to Brennan Johnson or that 3-way swap? That's kind of the decision that I've got to make. It's a really tough one, in my opinion, in my midfield. A lot of people in the comments are probably going to berate me for that, even thinking that it's a tough decision. I should just definitely get rid of Eze. But going forward, the Palace fixtures are good. We know Eze is going to start every game, play 90 minutes. Those underlying numbers, I'll just go back to that split screen with Johnson. 3.5 expected goal involvements this season and only 1 goal. I just think there's goals coming for him, and it's just been, well, it's obviously his fault that he hasn't taken the chances, but I do think that will change coming up. Oh, it's a really tough one for me. You know, do I stick or twist, basically, on Eze and find out at the end exactly what I plan to do. All right, finally, up front, last week I had Haaland, Wood and Solanke, and I got to be honest, I don't see that changing this week. All 3 players have got very decent fixtures. Haaland with Wolves away, Chris Wood with Crystal Palace at home, and Solanke with West Ham at home as well. I just don't see any reason to get rid of any of these players, to be honest. I think very happy with all 3 of them. Chris Wood's been an absolute legend at that price point. Solanke looks fantastic for Spurs, and I think is actually playing on a level with Ollie Watkins, who a lot of people have in their team at like 1.5 million more expensive. And it, by the looks of it, Solanke is putting up actually better underlying numbers so far than Ollie Watkins is. And I probably imagine Son will be back for game week 8. But if he isn't, I would imagine that Solanke's on penalties too. So that's just something to bear in mind there. Chris Wood is confirmed on penalties for Nottingham Forest. And obviously Haaland's the pen taker for Man City. So 3 big pen takers up front. And ultimately, the forwards is easy for me. I don't see any reason to bench or sell these guys. All right, the moment you've all been waiting for. This is what I'm going to do with my team. I don't think I'm actually going to make a transfer here. I've always found in FPL history, right, I would say genuinely 50% of the transfers I have made in FPL, despite thinking at the time that they were logical, have actually netted me like negative points. Unless I've taken out a player that's like a long-term injury. Those luxury transfers from one player that's definitely going to play and is fit and ready to go to just another that I think is going to score more points, I think they backfire on me more often than not. And, you know, I'm in a position where looking at this team on paper, I think it's absolutely fine to get through game week 8 and do well as well. Like 68.3 expected points if I captain Haaland. 97% AI rating. Yeah, I think it's a really good looking team for this week, to be honest. 4 free transfers. I'll have 5 next week if I don't do anything with nothing in the bank. And 5 free transfers is basically a mini wild card. And I still think next week I'm going to struggle to use the 5. Obviously, the big debate in my team is what do I do with Eze? I think, well, I'm 95% sure I'm just going to keep him. Because I also have, you know, the stats say one side of the story, right? But there's a little bit of emotion behind it for me. And I guess I don't want to use the word PTSD because that's not the correct sort of, that's not the correct use of it. But I have suffered previously in FPL where a player that I've lost patience with scores after I sell them. And I just have a feeling that Eze's going to do that. Like I mentioned, Forest are a good defence, right? But you could back Eze to score against them. Likewise, he could score against Tottenham and Wolves. Those are 3, I would say, pretty decent fixtures. I'd just be worried that he scores when I get rid of him. And also, I think of the one move I would like to make the most, I think, is just straight swap him for Brennan Johnson. I think using the 3 free transfers to do Trent to a cheaper defender, Salah out and Eze out is probably just a bit too much. But straight swapping Eze to Johnson is really the move that I'd consider. But I just think long term, you know, I would only want to make a transfer if it was beneficial for me for more than 2 or 3 weeks. And I think with Tottenham just having so many options at their disposal in those forward positions, you know, Richarlison's injured at the moment, Son's injured at the moment, which I think, well, he's probably going to be back for game week 8. But I think all of that, and Kulusevski, Maddison, they've got so many options, obviously Solanke as well. They're not all going to fit into the same 11 together. And I think long term, there could be times where Brennan Johnson's dropped, particularly if his form drops off. I think he's going to do well across the season, but I don't think his level, he's basically got 1 return per start so far. I don't think that's necessarily sustainable for the whole rest of the season. For that reason, I think there will be times where he is benched, whereas as long as he stays fit, I think Eze plays every game. So yeah, with all that in mind, the 4 free transfers I've got, etc., I genuinely think I'm just going to roll my transfer. All right, and that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please leave me a like rating. I know a lot of what I've mentioned here is kind of repeated from my transfer plans video, but I guess that's ultimately the point. Like, my team selection is going to be around my transfer plans, but this is kind of the evolution of my thoughts, if that's the correct terminology to use, and eventual like decision making around my team. So what you've seen in my transfer plans video, if you caught it, was like my earlier thoughts, and here is me actually following through with my decisions. And ultimately, I just don't see the need to really make any transfers here. Let me know in the comments, though, if there's anything different. I think that's about it. If you've not already, by the way, and want to see more content from me, you can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just there on your screen. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.